Morning, everyone. We're just giving it a moment to allow participants to join, and then we will kick off. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join this masterclass series. My name is Tracy Freeman. I look after investor relations at BPESA. We're thrilled to have you taking time out to join the team today. This is the third of a four-part series that BPESA has been running with the Knowledge Group. The whole focus and aim is really to make sure that we continue building the excellence that we are showing as an offshore destination for the global business services community. And TKG has partnered with BPESA as our knowledge partner, really to look at upskilling BPESA members. The focus is really on our SME member community. So these are enterprises that have less than 250 employees and an annual turnover that's around about 220 million or less annually. The idea is really looking to support emerging small and medium-sized organizations who are BPO operators that are either domestic operators in South Africa and have a local operation, or small organizations that have a small global footprint and looking to scale and expand. And as we know, the industry is ripe for the picking at the moment. South Africa is doing really, really well on the global offshore front. And with us having won the or been identified as the top offshore destination from a CX perspective for 2021 and 22, South Africa is definitely standing out from a global perspective as a desirable offshore location. So this is really making sure that when buyers, clients have a look at South Africa and come and engage with you as an organization, that we're setting everybody up for success. There have been 2 previous sessions that we've run with TKG. And what we looked at the first time around is really understanding the buying cycle from a procurement perspective, and understanding better what logos and clients are looking for in the source market, but then also from BPOs themselves. And then we also had a look at what platforms will work for you as a BPO from a marketing perspective, how effectively, how best you can engage with the source markets and with the very clients that you're looking at engaging with. And most recently, we had a look at what the effective selling techniques would be into the source markets and how best to position yourselves. So today we're getting into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of an operation and what is actually important to the client from a service delivery perspective. There's one thing, obviously, setting up rapport, engaging with our clients, promoting the country, promoting the destination. But when the rubber hits the road and they have actually contracted with you, what becomes important to the clients, to the logos that you're landing up onboarding, specifically when we look at key areas such as WFM and the whole QA side of things. For those of you that don't know, South Africa pitches ourselves from an international perspective as a high quality destination, along with a number of other sort of value propositions. But if I stick on the high quality side of things, I'm actually quite proud of the fact that South Africa is the current secretariat from a global perspective that has helped write the ISO 18295 standards when it comes to the customer contact center side of things. And that really was to embed the quality aspect of what it is that we're doing from an international perspective and what you as BPO operators are offering to the global community. We really want to make sure that whenever we are touching any client, regardless of which BPO is engaging with that client, that we are ensuring that we are offering absolute high quality effectiveness, efficiencies coming out of the country. One organization doing well is good for all the organizations in South Africa. So I'm really excited to have TKG on today and our subject matter experts that are going to drill into the what really matters to the client. The idea is for this to be an interactive session. So I'm shortly going to hand over to Dave Rumble, who will set the scene and introduce our subject matter experts for today. And thereafter, we really would like to open up for interactive questions, queries. And of course, this is a session that we're running now. It will be recorded, so you can go back and refresh and review. Equally, though, we have session 1 and session 2 that have been recorded. You should have seen the links. If you haven't seen them, just let me know and we can share those with you again. And then, of course, there will be a 4th in this series as well. But I hope you enjoy the session. I hope you get value out of it. And on that note, let me pass over to you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for the introduction. Morning, everybody. Early morning in the UK, and I guess obviously now with the time difference, a slightly later morning in South Africa. So I guess just a quick upfront positioning really from TKG about why we are supporting the Masterclass series with BPESA in terms of the Knowledge Partnership. So, I mean, principally, the motivation for our business is really to support the continued growth and the continued momentum in South Africa, particularly, but we cover other parts of the world, which I'll come on to in a second. So really for us in talking and reaching to the SME market in South Africa, it gives us an opportunity to engage and share perspectives from client-side source markets, as Tracy said, that will help build momentum and, more importantly, help us with our proposition with showcasing the talent that's available in other parts of the world. So the motivation really for us is a learning. It's a conversation, as Tracy's mentioned. So if any questions arise, please feel free, and we'll get to them through the session today. So let me tell you a little bit about TKG, if I can move the slides on. So TKG is a digital sourcing company. We support clients with buying services, and these are all in the GBS sector. So we cover everything from call centers through to technology outsourcing. So we help buy, we then help build. So we help organizations in the setup and establishment of operations, principally using what we call ecosystems. So this is where we put a collective of organizations together to compete with the larger providers who are able and are obviously dominating the market, but able to provide large scale operations. So we add components together of smaller operators to create a bigger unit. So buy, build, and then we finally we help with operating the services. So buy, build, operate is our approach, and we've got a number of projects that are currently running in South Africa, where we're supplying to the source markets in Anglophone, so UK, and also into the US. So we're based in the UK. Our market coverage is principally Europe, but we do, as I say, support work from the US into South Africa, and clearly very keen to see South Africa grow as part of our service proposition. So in terms of our contributions today, so we've got Jan. Jan Lewis has been in operations and solutions, has worked on client side, has worked on supply side, and is a TKG go-to person for all things operational and solutioning. I won't say how long Jan's been in the industry because she can reach me from where she is and probably will give me a slap. So I won't say that, but a lot of experience and a great asset for us to reveal, I guess, the conversation about operations today and how we establish those and build the trust between client and supplier. Then we've got Marc. Marc, long time in the support services world, predominantly in workforce management and business insight areas, so the RPM, what we will call the RPMI areas, but also covers QA and the wider aspects of support services, and more meaningfully from the point of view of building and establishing relationships, understanding those things that are important to clients when we are building effective solutions to deliver to client promises and outcomes. So Marc's a very strong expert in that world of kind of building the evidence-based linkages between a client and supplier. For my sins, I'm a grey-haired bloke who just happens to be controlling the microphone at the moment, but I chair and co-founder of TKG, so delighted to be here today. So in terms of what we're covering today, we're going to get into operations, and so I guess more meaningfully what matters to clients in terms of making sure that we've got the dialogue right and we've properly understood requirements. Then we get into the nuances of making sure that the exchange and requirements that go into building trust are there and the foundations are there. So the context for delivery of services, which are predominantly in this world about the delivery of resource. So very important that we focus on making sure that the workforce and the management of operations is properly structured. Then we go into the elements that help us succeed operationally, and we'll come back. So please feel free to ask questions. We've got quite a broad range of subjects here to cover in a relatively short time. So, so hopefully we can get into a bit of a conversation. So I'm now going to hand over to Jan, who's going to help us with the next bit.
Thanks both. And I think if we start, and something I picked up on when Tracy opened this masterclass was setting ourselves up for success. And I guess, you know, Tracy touched on the fact that you've built your relationships, you've got all the good stuff coming on, but now you move into the operational context. And for me, it's like Dave said earlier, it's very much about putting in strong foundations. And that starts when you go into solutionizing. So you've got all your relationships in place. Now you have to do the bit of bidding for the work, and hopefully you succeed in getting it. And for me, that solution is very key to the foundation. So, you know, you might have a bid team, it might be your CEO, it might be subject matter experts, but when they're pulling the solution together to sell to your clients, you know, make sure that whatever you're selling is actually achievable. So it's great, you know, you can go in with a price, but what sits behind the price is, can you actually deliver on that model? And as Dave said, you know, I've been in this business far too long. Thank you for not mentioning how long. But, you know, I've done really good solutioning and I've had really bad solutioning. And I think if I give you an example is, and I'm sure Dave won't mind me saying this, we did a very big solution where Dave headed it, but he had everybody involved. So he would often say to me, right, Jan, can you deliver this? Can you multi-skill this? Should we keep it separate? But he always, you know, spoke to IT, planning, recruitment, training to make sure everything we were trying to sell was achievable. And that's a good example. But then a bad example is when your solutioning team might come up with a price, think, yes, we can do A, B, and C. Do not speak to anybody who's got to deliver it. And when you have to deliver it, the foundations are a bit wobbly then because nobody knew what they had to sort of deliver at the back end. So for me, it's make sure your solution team work with all your SMEs, you know, make sure you can get the right people and that you can deliver it to make sure, you know, whatever you've sold and the price is achievable. And I think many things change through this business, but what's always key and never changes is your people, your process, your technology. And those three words are still key, I think, in 20 years of the industry. So if we start with people, you know, always think, can you recruit the right people with the right skill set? And I know, you know, I've worked with South Africa for about 10 years setting up operations, and you've got some really great people there. But sometimes, both in the UK, South Africa, and globally, you can recruit people. That's the great part. But have they got the right skill set? And for me, it's whatever call type you're going to be taking, you know, play those type of calls to your agents because they're very, very different. Every call type is different. So the people you are recruiting have the right skill set to answer those calls. And that's your first starting place. Then you move on to make sure you've got great processes that sit behind that. And your processes can be as simple as when somebody starts, how do you document the process they go through to make sure they have their logins, they get paid, all of that good stuff. And if you work with your client, and this sounds so simple, you know, always ask, do they have their standard operating model? And what that means is you have a document that has all the processes to manage their business fully documented. And you think, that's a simple one, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have it documented. So always make sure you ask for that, and that will help you on your way to having good processes and driving consistency for them. And the last one is technology. And again, it sounds so simple, but it's making sure that the technology you are putting in your solution can deliver what you need to. Sometimes you will use a reputable telephony system, which perhaps isn't that good for doing emails or some social media. So, you know, whatever you are looking to sell, make sure you've got the robust technology that sits behind that. And I think as long as you keep people, process, technology in your mind when you're doing this solution, you'll be in a good place. The last bit I want to touch on is collaborating with key stakeholders. And we often think of stakeholders as being your external, the client. Obviously, they're a big part of this. And I think going back to what Dave touched on earlier is making sure you get the trust of your clients. Not that simple, because they'll always worry at any startup, and it becomes a partnership, you know, and you don't keep going back to the contract. It's a true partnership where you've got open and honest discussions. That's the bit with your external clients. Then you have your internal client stakeholders, and your internal would be like your quality departments, because you know, quality should sit outside operations. So you're not marking your own homework, your MI, your technology, and your WFM as well. So, you know, all of those components are key. But I think one bit of your success and to build on your foundations is having the right people in the right place at the right time. And that's where sort of a key internal stakeholder comes into play, which is Marc. So I'll probably hand over to Marc at this point, and then
I'm going to ask you some questions, Jan. You don't get to run away. You don't get to run away. So I'm going to put some. I guess just for context, really, I think so. So I guess the the point from, I guess, from a lot of clients' perspectives, and I guess the audience will be asking the same thing. So very often, price is always the determining factor. So when a client chooses to outsource, they're generally trying to save money. Clearly, if the source market is the UK, then you know, there is a price difference between service from the UK and from South Africa. I guess the question, I guess, is coming back to the point with, are there things that you would suggest that organizations would have or individuals would have in terms of asking a set of questions? So building a strong foundation for delivery, do you go in with a set of questions that you know are a set of questions that you really should be asking because they fit what you do in terms of the operation? What you know, kind of, I guess, what comes first? Does the client set the requirement, and then we try and design something to a price? Or do we start with what we've got and say that delivers a price, and if we can't do that price, then we don't get ourselves involved in a project where, you know, potentially we're going to lose money? I guess I'm just trying to understand from your perspective, what do you think is, do you start with yourselves first, or do you start with the client first in terms of that solutioning?
I think, you know, the great solution would be, what does good look like? And then what would that cost to deliver? But unfortunately, in the current marketplace, everybody is chasing the price. So, if the client says to you, I'm looking to pay, X an hour, unfortunately, you've got to start at that place. And then you have to go out and think, what can that solution look like to come back to deliver that price? And sometimes you can make it work, absolutely make it work. And there's lots of efficiencies you put in. But sometimes you have to step back and say, no, it's not achievable. But I think you can always make it achievable. So, sometimes when the client will give you a price of what they're looking at, you think this isn't going to work, but you can always work through the commercials and I guess drive the efficiencies in the solution. So I'd love to say the first, but probably the last.
Yeah. And then just I've got I guess the next question, I guess, for our audience who are smaller organizations. You've got delivering effectively through people, process, and technology. Is that deliberate? Are people more important than process and technology? I mean, just in terms of if you're going to be different and you're going to stand out, which one are they all are they all equal, or is one more important than the other? We're in a people.
I think it's probably a third, because if you don't get the right people and you see mass attrition, you're never going to achieve the price, which we've just touched on. So, people is key. And, we very much talk about the agents coming into the business, but also you have to have very, very good team managers, because your team managers are key to delivering the outputs and engaging with the people, etc. So I think that's a third of it. Process, and I'll touch on this a bit later on, but process is very, very important, and sometimes it's forgotten and people add on and the processes stop being efficient. So always drive, what's your insights telling you, and how do you always drive process improvement, and always keep a figure on that. And for me, technology is key, because if you haven't got a robust technology solution, you're not going to deliver the outputs or get the MI to give you the insights. So I'm probably going to sit on the fence and go a third for all.
Okay. Well, I'll be contentious and say it's 100% people.
How would they go in to take the calls, Mr. Rumble, if they haven't got a phone?
Precisely. They can sit around. But anyway, and on that note, we get into managing workforce effectively. So if I could get my machine just to allow me to move on to introduce Marc into the conversation. So Marc, help us with managing our workforce.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for the warm welcome earlier on. So I guess workforce management, for anyone that hasn't come across the workforce management team before, it is an area that is a minefield of terminology and acronyms. So you're going to hear stuff like Erlang, occupancy, blending, PCA, FTE, AHTs, all that sort of thing. So if I do, I will try and explain as we go through, if I reference anything, but as Dave mentioned, if I don't, by all means, drop it into the chat and I'll pick it up as a question. So to start off with then, I guess, understanding your client requirements. I guess for me, the first recommendation would be always talk in the same unit as the client. So you'll have some clients that talk in productive hours. You'll have some clients that talk in net available hours. Now, both of those are exactly the same thing. But again, just to save with any ambiguity, it's important that we talk the same language as the client, even when that comes down to FTE. So what full-time equivalent is. So you as a supplier might have a full-time equivalent of 40 hours. But your client that you're servicing has a full-time equivalent of 37.5 hours. So it's important that you always reference the 37.5, and your FT internally would end up being like 1.1, for example. I mean, just getting those small things right at the beginning, it'll just make the things a lot simpler going forward. I guess the next thing is, as Jan mentioned, is the solution deliverable. So from a planning point of view, you need to understand what the opening hours are, system access to telephony, client telephony, etc. And you need to understand those and consider those when, especially in South Africa, working with time zones. We're in the UK, it's 8:30 in the morning now, it's 10:30 in South Africa, but we have clients that open till 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. in the evening. So if you're looking at working on a bid or accepting a client that are open to that times, do you have the ability from a staffing point of view to staff to those times in South Africa? So, can you staff till like midnight or 1 a.m. from a transport point of view? So as Jan mentioned, we have to make sure the solution is deliverable. A couple of other things to think about is understanding the channels that the client wants to be serviced. So stuff like, inbound voice, outbound dialing, web chat, email, social media, stuff like that. What are the service levels or the SLAs for each of the areas? So, inbound voice, do you work on an 80% of calls answered within 20 seconds? Is it 70-30? And then for your emails, as an example, is it 4 hours? Is it 24 hours? Is it 2 days? And then once you understand those sort of things, you can then start looking at the methodology that you use to size them. So if you're sizing inbound voice as an example, you'd be wanting all that data that you receive from the client to be in the interval length that the client works to. Again, so this comes back to talking in the same unit. So, if the client works in 15 minutes or 30 minutes or even 60 minutes, you then use an Erlang calculation to size your requirements based on the calls and the HT in that 15, 30 or 60-minute interval. And then when you're calculating like email or back office, for example, you'd be wanting the data probably ideally in intervals, but certainly as a minimum at a daily level, so you can plan your distribution throughout the week. We then get into the sizing of the channels. So as I mentioned, you request the data and the AHT from the client, always get it at the lowest possible level. Interval level for inbound and daily for back office. But then also you need to consider, does your solution including blending? So what I mean by blending is that you'll use Erlang to size your inbound calls, and as part of that sizing, you'll have some available time or unoccupied time. And you might want to solutionize it in a way that you do some of your back office within that available time, which will obviously make you more efficient and more appealing to the client. But again, it's just understanding whether that is something that can be done. And if it can, then you do it and size it correctly. And then once you have all that data, you build your requirement into the demand, and that can be done in a workforce management system, or if you wouldn't get the return on investment from a WFM system, that can actually be done in Excel with an Erlang calculation built in. And again, just for everyone's awareness, there is a really good piece on the internet on the call center helper website, which I think we're probably going to share the link to that for anyone that needs it. So we've built the demand. We then start to look at the supply and building a capacity supply. And it's worth remembering that in this instance, or in most instances, one size doesn't fit all. So you need to try and be flexible around the demand requirements as part of the solution. So what I mean by that is, rather than just having all full-time people, which can be very inefficient, will more part-time people be a benefit? Will having hybrid working be a benefit? Because you may have somebody working from home that can actually work a couple of hours in the morning and work a couple of hours in the evening, where you potentially have your peak requirements. So those sort of things, again, as Jan mentioned earlier, all about your solution, is it able to be delivered? We then need to calculate the amount of people that we need to deliver the overall requirement. And you take your demand requirement in productive hours or net available hours, and then you overlay your shrinkage on top of that. And what I mean by shrinkage is, I always class shrinkage as 3 levels. So you've got tier 1 or level 1, which is out of office shrinkage. So that includes your holidays, your absence, anything that stops you coming into work as such. You've then got your level 2 or tier 2 shrinkage. So once you're in work, it stops you becoming productive. So that'll be like unpaid lunches, paid breaks, investment time, coaching, meetings, one-to-ones, all that sort of thing. And then finally, the last level is once you are productive, it's any time that's lost, which is classed as conformance loss. So those 3 elements need to be overlaid onto your demand requirement, which will then give you an overall staffing requirement that you need to deliver to. It's worth noting as well that, again, going back to is the solution deliverable, but you need to consider whether your shrinkage is deliverable as well. So I always recommend people and companies build their shrinkage from the bottom up. So what I mean by that is holiday entitlement. So rather than just assuming 10%, 11% or whatever it may be, actually calculate what a holiday entitlement is. And that will change, possibly dependent on length of service. Same with break entitlement. Obviously, that will change based on contracted hours. So if you build that up from the bottom, you're going to be able to look back and see if there's any variation to that plan. The other shrinkage elements is what I class as like hidden shrinkage elements. So you've got like your adherence loss, and you've got your shift inefficiency. And shift inefficiency is something that you calculate once your shifts have been built, and it's basically time that you need to deliver from an agent because they are in the building, but not necessarily time that can be filled up with either demand or shrinkage, but they are going to be there, just going to be sat available on the phone. So obviously, if you can reduce the amount of shift inefficiency, it's great, but obviously having really non-appealing shifts, shall we say, that can drive attrition as well. So there is hidden shrinkage within any organization. I guess just on the shift bit, there is a fine balance for any supplier, because you have to, within workforce management, you have to balance your shift methodology across financial deliverables within the company, but also your employee engagement. And what I mean by that is that if you deliver exactly what the client is after, some of those shifts may be unsociable hours, and you might be having a lot of people working really late in the evening, and that could potentially drive attrition. So going back to the point earlier around would part-time people or home working benefit that, but also as well, if you do have more part-time people, and you give everyone the same amount of investment, that's going to add and increase your shrinkage. So it's going to be more of a cost to the business, which needs to be considered as well. And then the last point is just reviewing the delivery and continuous refinement. So we've talked about all the demand elements. We need to be able to report on all of those elements as well. So volumes received, AHT that has been delivered, SLAs, occupancy, all that good stuff. But then also from a supply point of view, we need to be able to deliver on that as well. So, we need to be able to say what our absences were, what our holidays were, what our internal shrinkage was, because we were going to want to review what it was against the plan that we created in the first place. And I think that the last bit just for me is it is important that we have all that data, but it's even more important about what we do with it. So if there's anything, we need to make informed decisions on the data that we have. So if there's one word I finish with, is probably insight. That's the biggest thing when reviewing the data.
Thanks, Mark. I think, I was just gonna chip in. So I think you mentioned that we're after this going to publish a link to a site. Obviously, there's a lot of technicality in delivering this. I think it's probably worthwhile. I'll chip in as well. That I think from a TKG perspective, we'll also add in a glossary of terms, because I think some of these things, particularly when we're sourcing, are exceptionally important to clients. So some of the definitions, just in one example, a worked hour, as you were saying, Marc, a worked hour, a logged hour, a paid hour. There's all these different currencies. So I think what we can do is provide that for part of the knowledge partnership. So provide a glossary of terms. I think one thing I was going to ask you, Marc. Obviously, this is it's a very technical area, and for smaller organisations, I guess this is where one of those areas where you can either make money or lose money, and the influence of being able to manage a workforce effectively can be the difference between surviving as a business or thriving as a business. Have you got any thoughts or any ideas just in terms of the I guess the risk, just in terms of the quantum? So have you got any examples of where you've seen people get it wrong, drastically wrong, the wrong currency, or an alignment in terms of expectations, and I guess try and give an indication of the size of opportunity here.
So I guess when it doesn't go right, you do have some companies that they will do like the sizing, and again I'll make a number up, but let's say that once you've factored all your volumes and AHTs, you're going to come out with, let's say, 50 FTE, for example. That's ultimately the output once you've factored in all your shrinkage as well. Where it's important that, again, you're tracking the data, be it from a demand or a supply point of view. You may have 50 FTE and you may deliver 50 FTE on a regular basis, but it's how that FTE is made up, first of all, because if you factored in, let's say, 24% shrinkage, but you're not tracking what that shrinkage is, and you end up delivering 30% shrinkage, even though at an overall level you're delivering 50 FTE, you'll be failing service levels because you've not got the enough productive time to support your client. I think, to Jan's point, having the right people in the right place at the right time. So again, you may deliver 50 FTE, you may deliver 24% shrinkage, but if your distribution of that FTE is all over the place, so like you're massively under on a Monday, you're massively over on a Tuesday, you're not going to deliver what the client wants there. So that's where it's important you don't just do the bit up front, which is the sizing bit. It's making sure that you are tracking everything on the back of it.
And I guess the next question, I guess, relates, into a kind of a size. I think we would see from an industry perspective that once an organisation starts to get above 200 FTE, 200 people, then they're going to start to have their own function and their own capability to do this. And obviously, if you're a supplier and you're part of a network of suppliers, how much is dictated, in your experience, by the clients in terms of what notice period do people give you? So how much if you can just give us an indication just in terms of the time, the process. So the client says, I want 50 FTE. At what point down to the day that you're delivering service? Are there any kind of recognized standards around kind of, I guess, that flow of information?
So I've worked with clients that have had like a 9 or a 10 week lot requirement, so they will give the information for you to be able to do all the work 9 or 10 weeks in advance. But then the flip side of that, we've worked with clients where you're only getting 2 weeks notice. But I think it's important as a supplier that when you are agreeing the lock window or the lock timelines, is that you're taking into consideration the complexity of the work that you're doing. If it's very difficult calls, about making sure that you've got the right people. Your training durations might be, 4-week training. You're not going to want to accept a 2-week lock window if your training is 3 or 4 weeks, because you've got then no ability to flex your resource up or down. So I think it's important that that lock window is a two-way agreement. Don't just be dictated, because you have to take into consideration your internal timelines as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I think that's a great way, the kind of the link between what clients are asking for, chunking it through the machine to give an answer, and then I guess making sure that we can get into to not running a sweatshop and being being a difficult employer just in terms of looking after our people. So thanks for that, Marc. I'm going to hand over to Jan now, who is going to take us through the working together element.
Thank you. And I think, if we listen to what Marc just said, it's very complex. And I think, they would have to be the experts. And the way I see it, you've got operations as perhaps your support service customer, but then you need the experts that can support you to deliver an effective operation. And that starts with recruitment, recruiting the right people. You have your training, which is another key area for me, and it's not just delivering the induction training. You might ask for extra training, for your team managers or your agents. It can be soft skills training, or how do you help your team managers to coach effectively? Because coaching doesn't come naturally to everybody. So training isn't just delivering your core induction training. It's also there to support every other aspects of training. And again, that's a niche service that, you rely on, I guess, to support the operation. MI is another area. I love MI because without the MI, we don't have the insights, and you work very closely with MI to ensure you have the reporting you need at what time you need it every day to help you have the crucial conversations and give the valuable insights to your client. Planning. What Marc and his team does is exceptional, and you work very, very closely with the planning function, because again, they're a different expert to your ops team. Quality is another key element, because I think as much as the clients often want price, they want exceptional quality as well. So you need a really good quality function that, again, will check all your calls, will do calibration with your team managers, do calibration with your client. And when I say calibration, that just means to make sure that you're all marking the same. So we don't want to deliver to our clients, are we delivering 90% quality? Well, actually, we're marking our own homework, and perhaps we're being slightly lenient. So calibration with the operation and the client is key. So I think a quality aspect is another key support service you need there. You also need your finance department, because they'll, sort of keep you on track and make sure you're making the money. So all of those areas, I often think operations sits in the center, and then you have all your support service functions that feed into you. But, sometimes you haven't got all of those separate departments if you're running a small FTE business, but where I'll often ask for MI from Marc's area, which is planning services, because they can normally give you some MI. So you don't have to always build an expensive support service function, but I do think it's key to have experts you can rely on in all of those areas. And then it takes me on to governance, I guess, and, how do you govern all of this effectively? So when I talk about governance, it's making sure you have regular meetings, everything is documented, whether it be your actions, anything you agree on, all of that good stuff is in place. And again, I guess if I go back to, I work with some companies where governance isn't in place, and that's all that drives is confusion around both your business and the client's business. So many people say, oh, I didn't know that, because you haven't met regularly. So, internal governance, I would always meet with recruitment, training, planning on a weekly basis, because what that would tell you is, if we go back to Marc's point, is, what service am I delivering to the client? What's causing any negative impact? Maybe absence has gone up, or, it's like when we were in COVID, you see, higher absence, and there's a valid reason, but how do you mitigate that? And to mitigate it, it might be you have to recruit more people to make sure you deliver the end service. So you would speak to recruitment to say, can you get me X amount of people in on this date? Ideally, you'd give them 6 weeks notice. Doesn't always work like that. Do you have the trainers to train those people? And then when you will be back in service. Or again, you might see higher than planned attrition, anything that can impact your service delivery. Could be that, I focus very much there on absence, but your HT might rise. What's caused your AHT to rise? Is it a change in customer queries, in which case maybe it's becoming more of a complaint call, in which case then you would say to training, actually, can you give me a training course to run around, to run across all the operations, to how to manage effectively certain conversations that they're having with the customers. So, it's important that you have those regular calls and key people are involved. I always think every week you would speak to those people. If you're having technical issues, you might bring in, technical calls or MI calls. But when those are all stable, I think you have to have those governance calls as weekly. Suggest you always meet with your finance team, if not weekly, bi-weekly, just to make sure you're on track, because you don't want to get to the next month and find you've lost money. So work closely as well with your finance team, who can ensure that you're making money on every sort of contract that you're running. Those are very focused on your internal governance, but then you need a robust governance with your clients as well. Some clients want to speak to you every morning to go over the numbers that are already in their inbox, but they might also look for insights. So, they might ask you, what are my customers saying? And you need to get that, I guess, insights from either your MI, or actually, do you know what? Just speak to your agents, because they are the people that know every call type, what people are asking. Because some days, I was on a sort of contract quite recently where the call type changed and the customers were asking very different questions. So, you need to get that insights daily and feed it into your customers. And then you would normally have your daily touch points, or it might just be twice a week touch points. But then that rolls up to your monthly business reviews. And that's an opportunity to show them what's happened over the previous month. And you normally get different stakeholders coming into those meetings. And you would have your quarterly business review, where for me, quarterly is you'd have your senior stakeholders, and your quarterly business reviews is very much about strategic, where is your client going strategically, and also what can you offer the clients. You keep on building on from the bid stage, and that's a perfect opportunity. Another governance that I would want every week, I think, is going back to the question that Mark and Dave discussed at the end of the last topic is, meet with the planning functions, and that would be operations, your planning function, and the client planning function, because that should be where they lock down, or you discuss if there's going to be a media announcement that could drive more calls in, or something has happened where, I did sort of airline and bombing went off in one airport. So actually we knew calls were going to go in the increase. So you would meet with all the planning functions to see what's the art of them possible, what can you change. You can't perhaps get more people in, but can you drive extra overtime or move shifts because you're in a state of emergency, so planning, their planning, our planning, their media people, marketing are all key to be involved in that. So if you make sure your governance is in place, you'll always get the right people on the right calls, looking at what the art of the possible is, and actually, are you just on track? And it might be a 10 minutes call, but I can't say how important governance is, both internally and externally.
Can I chip in with a question, Jan?
Yes.
Because I know governance is really important, because that helps build trust. But can I just, there's obviously the conversation we're focused on very much the stakeholders, I guess, horizontally. So we talk, support services and marketing and finance. I guess the bit which kind of hasn't come through in the conversation as much is the vertical.
Yeah.
And the importance of team manager. Yeah. So very often on smaller projects, the team manager takes all of the pressure of dealing with absence, coaching, quality assurance, workforce management. I guess the thing from my perspective, just the importance of development of that group, the team managers, the frontline supervisory layer, because ultimately if those people's careers progress, they may end up in one of these functions. So can you just give us some insight just into the importance, I guess, of the team manager and the types of skills that a team manager is going to need? Obviously now we've got work, some of it now, hybrid models. Can you just bring to life just some of the things that you see from a team manager perspective as being the important skills that they would have?
Yeah, and I think you touched on it in the first sort of slide. People are very, very important, and you know what? If you retain your people, you've got your expertise, and you're not on the speed to competency all the time. So for me, team managers are crucial. I think, I expect team managers to spend at least 85% of their time just coaching their team. And when I say coaching, whether it's, if you're on site, whether they're walking around, just saying morning to their team, or if you're working from home remotely, you set up an open chat room where you're still interacting with your team as you would on site. Coaching is then having an effective team meeting, doing the one-to-ones, feeding back all the quality scores. But for me, their role is just about spending time with their people. Yeah. Often, I've gone into organizations where team managers are sitting in front of their desk looking for MI, and that's where support services should be delivering the MI to the team managers. They look at what the MI is telling them and go and coach effectively. And that's why I feel, a support service function is key. So that allows your team managers to do what they should be
Yeah,
doing and being with their team.
So I think, I guess for today's audience is really just saying, look, you know, the team manager, where is this all goes wrong is very often, you know, that team manager level. And so you're just drawn out there, you know, equipping that first line of supervisory levels to be able to deliver the job effectively is what will make sure that the front line are delivering to whatever those customer requirements are. So
yeah,
and to Mark's point, making sure that you've got people attending in the right time slots, making sure that when people are in work that they're doing it effectively and delivering to the quality standards and within the parameters of the time to complete the work. So there's quite a lot of pressure, I guess. So I think just in terms of, you know, kind of bringing that to life, it's just making sure that the relationship between, you know, the team managers understand what the support services are doing and vice versa, and everybody's talking the same language. But it does seemingly, you know, seem to me to be quite a big step now, particularly if we're doing remote working, because those team managers are going to be doing some different things. So the importance of the support services, giving them the information, being able to the team manager being able to access the information quite quickly to be able to address that, I think is obviously now a key part of it.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, we've touched on planning, but for me, planning falls into 3 categories. You know, they plan to the client's forecast, then they schedule the shifts so the right people have the right shifts in the right place. But then are they real time, you know, queue management, whatever we call them, managing the queues effectively? Because that goes back to your point again, Dave, is I don't want a team manager looking at their desk and moving skill sets, queues around, stop doing emails, take calls, vice versa. That, you know, it goes back to your, you know, effective support service function again. And I think, you know, if I go back to the governance, you know, and I think we've looked sort of horizontal across all of those aspects. But the other key aspect is always making sure you have an effective escalation point. Yeah. So, you know, you'll have your daily interactions, and that might be your ops manager, your head of operations, your team managers sometimes interacting with the client daily, ops manager, who client services, wherever they are called. But then the next level up is actually, you know what, I'm not happy with the service, or they're not delivering what I'm asking them to. So then you would expect your COO or the next senior person in operations to have the next call with the senior stakeholder, like you would have in the MBRs. And, you know, hopefully it never comes to it, but sometimes it comes. It can go up to CEO level, but you know, the CEO should always be talking to the senior person in the client. So actually they can have a very grown-up conversation and sort of, you know, stop any, well, it can't go any further escalations, but what you don't want is to go into remedial actions and you start talking contracts. So always make sure that, you know, different people can interact with different client people, so you can have the serious conversations if ever needed as well. And if ever I would say the biggest piece for me is be open and be honest, because, you know, I think if you can be open with your client, they will trust you. And if you build trust, that's when it becomes a partnership. You know, don't ever lie. If you've got higher shrinkages, they'll see it in the MI. So just be open, be honest, and tell them what you're doing to mitigate it. And that's a
great segue. Thank you very much. I think Marc, you've got the very important job of summarizing, I think, Marc, which I think, there we go. So you're going to take all this great and rich content and boil it down into the 4 points that we've got here, and then we can get
So I guess just to summarize then, so making sure the foundations of the solution are effective, we need to make sure they're achievable in the long run. ensure everyone in, internal and external stakeholders are using the same language of units. You don't want any misinterpretation. Having the right people in the right place at the right time with the reporting to monitor all of that. Establishing people, process, and technology. And I think where possible, just making sure that your support areas are right sized as well. I know we talked about right size in the frontline operation, but we've seen many a company struggle when the support areas aren't right sized. And then finally, just have a robust governance with a collaborative approach. Make sure we work as one team across multiple support areas. Don't work in silo.
Perfect. Don't work in silos. Teamwork. That's what it's all about. Well, thanks both. I have seen some questions in both the chat box and also in the Q&A. So I'm going to go to Q&A first. The question is pricing models. Wow. Okay, we're straight to pricing. Let's get to this. It's probably a client this rather than the supplier. So I'll go to you, Marc, first on this one. So the best outsourcing pricing model for clients. Yeah. So what's the best one from a buyer perspective? And then the question also asks, what's the best one from a supplier perspective? So, so we've got to give. I'm happy to also contribute. Which is the best, and are they the same?
Personally, I would say that they are the same. I think using productive or net available hour as a starting point is. Well,
you're gonna have to expand on what you mean by net available hour. What's in it?
Okay, so net available hour is literally your workload or volume multiplied by your AHT. So talk, wrap, hold, all that sort of stuff, and your available time. It's basically what you need to deliver service level. So if you need to deliver 3 agents in a 30-minute interval, that would be 1.5 hours in that interval. That is the best starting point.
And what? So let's go down into this for yeah. So we mean from I'll do a voice call. Yeah. So I'm not going to do email or anything like that because it's So you're meaning call time. So the time that somebody's actually talking. The time that they're doing work after they finish talking that they might need to do processing notes on a screen or on a customer application. So those two things. Yeah. Plus the time they're waiting to take a call. That's what you mean by that. That's what you mean by a net available hour. So it doesn't include breaks. It doesn't include coaching. It doesn't include anything else. So it's actually the transaction time and the time that you're waiting to receive a transaction.
It would also include what we class as hold time. So if you're needing to ring another department to ask a question, for example, so it'd include that as well. So so that is a productive hour. So even though you're waiting for a call, you might not think you're productive. You actually are being productive because you're ready to answer a call. Yeah.
So that works for clients and suppliers both because it's easy to understand. And that works in customer care. Okay. So what about sales? Because most clients always say, I don't want to pay for all of that. I just want to pay for the sales that you make. So when it comes to things like outbound, maybe even responding to chat, are there different charging models that you've seen for there that work for clients? Because most clients will say, I don't want to pay for the risk of you not performing, so I want a per sale deal or a per transaction deal. What do you think about, say, for sales as an example?
Yeah, I think there are different ones. you could have, if you're doing outbound dialing from a sales point of view, you could literally just have a mechanism that pays based on a sale, or you might be able to have a touch point, so at least when you're contacting the customer. But even when you're coming up with those creative methods, you want to make sure that obviously you're covering your costs and you are making a margin. So you do start to get into blurry territory. You might go into a reward and recognition element. But yeah, you start to get into grey areas then, which, you know, some clients will want that, and some suppliers will want that as well, because they're able to put on, you know, bonuses on top of the hourly rate or the targets that they're trying to achieve. So there is that enhancement for them, but it can come back down to interpretation then on whether certain things have been achieved. So again, that comes back to what we've talked about before. Whatever is agreed to needs to make sure that we've got the data to back it up when we're
perfect
applying pricing.
So net available hour. So, and that's the currency that TKG I think uses most often.
I think from a supplier point of view as well, if you can get obviously shrinkage paid for by the client, that would obviously benefit. You know, you might get a client that does want a supplier to invest in their people. You know, I have seen clients that just do productive hour. I've seen clients that will bill for coaching and training time because they see that it's important, because it could improve the quality, as Jan talked about before. And also ultimately the customer experience at the end of that. So when I say net available hour or productive hour, that is the starting point. There is obviously further conversations that you could have after that as well.
Perfect. And then one thing I'll just chip in with for the audience is never put more than your net margin at risk if you're doing risk and reward. Don't want to be losing money if it goes wrong. So next question is, are there any, and this is an operational thing, Jan, I think, I guess. Are there any things that you would say that are non-negotiable? So in building up a price, is there anything that you would say that you wouldn't want to give on, whether it's, I don't know, I'll leave you to answer, but ratios, stuff like that?
Yes, and I was sitting on my hands when Marc was just saying go for the net available hour. So in my perfect world, I would love the fully productive hour where, you know, I wouldn't want to give on any investment time to our people, you know, because that's the first thing that will always go is when you're doing the net available hour is you remove team meetings, you remove one-to-ones, you remove the coaching for the quality aspect. So, you know, when you are building your price, make sure you build in that investment time and only pull it in extreme circumstances, you know, for emergencies, high shrinkage or high call volumes. But if high call volumes continue, then you have to invest in your people because they will leave.
Yeah. That's what we don't want. We don't want people to leave. Now, we also had some questions, which I think we had some questions in advance before we've come to this session. So I'm going to read them off here because I can't now see them on my screen for whatever reason I'm publishing. But so standards, ISO, we've got a question on that. How important, how relevant are standards when organizations are sourcing? Do those types of questions come up? You know, we talked about glossary of terms and you know, making sure that we manage productive time. What about quality assurance and stuff that goes into processes that are more qualitative? Have you got any ideas? I'll come to you on that one, Jan, because I think it's much more of an operational one. How important would you see standards being as a?
I think they are important. I think especially if you're going after a wider range of clients, that people will ask those standards now as part of it. It's not always a requirement when they go out for RFP, And when I say an RFP, request for information, you know, but I think if you've got it, it is important, and it could be, you'll score extra points as part of that process.
Yeah.
So it's more and more important, I think, to get it.
But if you're operating, so I think to your point, I think if you're operating as if you've got the standard, but you might not have the standard, that would, clients would get comfort about that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to evidence, isn't it? Is everything documented, and can you prove? Then yes, that will probably get you the marks as well.
So now an online question. So another question. So this one's definitely going to Marc, because this one's a question about WFM. The assumption that most WFM activity, so workforce management activity, is based on historic data. So you deliver what you've learned and what's gone before. So the question is, obviously with the pandemic has kind of moved things around and shifted customer demand, and has moved some things around operating models. It's also moved channels. So online transactions, interaction volumes have changed. Have you seen any, I guess coming to you, Marc, have you seen any kind of, I guess, let's get into, the top 3 big changes that you've seen as a consequence of the pandemic? So that's the first half of the question. And then the second half of the question is, what do you do if there's no historic data? So two questions. The 3 big things from, over the last 12, 18 months, maybe 2 years that have changed in WFM world. And then what do you do when you don't have historic data?
So pandemic has changed the landscape, I guess. I know certainly going through, we had historical absence assumptions as an example. Everyone was working in the building. There was very rarely any working from home before we had the pandemic. Obviously the pandemic came, and then there was this, this having to get used to a new way of working of, all our agents are now working from home, and understanding that. And then we did see over, a prolonged period of time, certainly in the UK anyway, where absences went really low. You normally plan for like 6-7% as an example, but we were talking like 1s and 2s. Now, that might be down to the circumstances, where, people were having to stay at home, they weren't allowed out. And now as we've come out of it, as we're coming out of it, we're probably starting to see those figures come back to what they were, but in the new world where people are still working from home, and a hybrid across the two. So again, probably big thing is understanding what works best for you as an organization, whether it is back in the office, because some companies are wanting everyone to go back, whether it's working from home, and again, just making sure that your assumptions are up to date, I guess, rather than using, to your point, Dave, around historical, because there are some things that aren't relevant anymore, and you've got to make new historical assumptions.
And then when you haven't got those historical assumptions, what do? We make stuff up. No, we don't do that, do we? We use science.
We use science and guessing style. No, I think without any historical, you've got to make some important assumptions based on what you know. But again, that's where I guess relationships with internally, people within other organizations, I know people that work in with other companies, relationships with the client, and gathering as much insight as you possibly can without the data to back it up. But I think it's really important though, when you are in a position where you have to do that you are able to react to changes quite quickly. So if you've made an assumption where you've gone with X, Y, and Z, and there is absolutely no harm in, after the first week, realizing that, you know, those assumptions might be completely out of the water.
Yeah.
What do you need to do very quickly to reevaluate those assumptions and then start using the data? So you're going from like a qualitative element where it's all insight, and then as you bring in quantitative data in, you're starting to adapt your approach based on what you've got. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, you make the important point. Document your assumptions, and then as things change, you refine and refresh. So we've got more questions coming in. I'm going to take the bottom two on this list. So checklists and learn industry jargon. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we'll provide a glossary of terms from TKG, and there is the link that we'll provide to one of the industry bodies just to help with the kind of the glossary of terms and checklists. So those two questions we'll answer outside the session, and we'll put content. We've got another question coming to Q&A, which is around working on site, working remotely, or in a hybrid operation, which I'm going to throw over to you, Jan. When you're looking at those choices between on site where everybody's together and in an operation where people could be either fully remote or in hybrid, so what are the top 3 things or top 4 things that you would you would say for considerations to think about when you're working between those two operating models?
Yeah, and funny thing, I'm working with a South African client now, and they're in the office, which is great, you know, teamwork, all of that. But I would love us to look at investing for people in South Africa to have the opportunity of perhaps doing the hybrid model. So, you know, what can we do to help people have broadband in their homes and the equipment sent out? Because, you know, with this particular client, we're working and the call demand is the back end of the night. So it's getting these people back home safely. You've got to put on transport, duty of care. Whereas if they could work from home, there's a number of advantages to that. They say if they're in their home, just give them the tools to be able to do that. And do you know what? There's so many advantages. I think, you know, now we've just got through COVID, everybody's got used to working from home, and the advantages are there. We used to say there were more advantages in employee engagement, being in the same office. I'd probably challenge that now, because I've seen how effective team managers have become working with those people. I think a hybrid model is perfect. So you're doing your face-to-face, you still got your engagement in one day a week. But it's the advantages of people working from home. They don't have to pay for transport costs. And a number of people, even if they've got a bit of a cold, if they just have to log on at home, they'll do it. Where to traipse into the office in bad weather, they probably think, no, I'm going to stay in bed. So, you know, let's see what we can do, investing to giving the people the opportunity to work from home. That would be amazing for me.
And then just in terms, I guess, we've got the questions about the operational strengths and weaknesses for South Africa. You've just mentioned a good example there, Jan. You know, is South Africa set up for that hybrid working, I guess, is the big question. You know, your experience, you're talking about a project now.
I think it is.
For South Africa, yeah.
And I think more people need to get into the mindset of weighing up how much it costs to put on transport. You've got the PCs in the office, but actually, you know what, give them a laptop and all of that. I would love to see, because I think we talk about operational strength. I mean, I'm slightly biased and set up lots of operations in South Africa, and your enthusiasm with the people, the skill set, your attraction to get employees is fantastic. So let's see how we can take it to the next level and get that hybrid model, because after COVID, you know what, we don't know what's going to hit us next, and having that as a business continuity is a big one for me.
And then we've just had a question arrive in the Q&A. So I think this is an important one. I guess this is a buyer question. Do you think that clients are making decisions now on whether a supplier has the ability to be hybrid? And are they, as a consequence, maybe not looking quite so much at office or in office as a solution? Or does it matter? I guess, you're working on a very current project where hybrid's an option.
I think people are looking more and more at hybrid now. I think if COVID's taught us anything, I can remember working from home, about 15 years ago. Then it went very much into office space. But now actually clients say they've seen lots of advantages to doing this hybrid and working from home. And a lot of people now still, even though COVID sort of, steady, don't go back to the office because there are so many advantages, so as well as
that one that you got somebody having a cold or somebody having a COVID, we couldn't let them in the call center, could we? So
absolutely not. And it's business continuity. When you're selling a product, if you can say, do you know what, something hits us, or in the UK at the moment we're seeing a lot of transport issues. Guess what? That issue is taken away then, isn't it? It's not hitting the delivery of hours,
Yeah. And I'd like to think that in wrapping up, that the work from anywhere solution, and somebody gave a great example at a recent event where somebody was dealing with a customer call while they were shopping and had their laptop on a shopping trolley walking around a store dealing with customer queries. So the work from anywhere solution, not just work from home, work from office. So look, guys, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there because we're on the top of the timing. And let me just get rid of this little box that I've got here sitting in front of me and just look. Thank you to BPESA for allowing us to support the program. We're very keen to maintain and continue a conversation and dialogue, and great that we've had some questions come through. I'm sure there are many more itching, which we can, I'm sure, funnel through Tracy and the team at BPESA. So on behalf of TKG, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to Jan. Thank you to Marc for being company with me and taking the interrogation at times. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thanks, Dave.
There'll be material that will come out. Obviously, the session's recorded. And thank you very much to our participants today. Thank you, Tracy. So over to you.
Fantastic, Dave. Yeah, thanks very much. And Jan, Marc, thank you very much. I think you've definitely stimulated the grey matter, and the participants that joined today and those that are going to consume the recording after this definitely have a lot of material to work with on how they can improve things on their side. So I anticipate that there will be more questions coming your way, and that's all about sort of building up the knowledge base that we're looking for here. So next one, excitingly enough and amazingly enough, we're already going into 2023, but the fourth session that we're going to be running with you is in February next year. We'll release the actual date and obviously be putting that out on our different platforms, and to the participants today, you'll receive the email, but it's going to be looking at making the most of opportunities. So looking at effective selling and how best to position for success, including the commercials, which came up today, and how to, and win themes that we're going to be looking at. So looking forward to that one. But in the meantime, thank you so much to everybody. To our UK guests, thank you. You can go and get your second cup of coffee for the day. And to our South Africans on the line, go and enjoy the weather that's out there, and good luck with the rest of the day. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Bye. Bye.
Thank you.